Hi there. Today we are going to be reading a book called Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lessmore. This is actually a movie that you can buy on, I think, Google Play as well. It's an awesome book. This book was donated to me from my former student, Ava, who I taught fourth grade to in Missouri. And she left me a sweet note that almost made me cry when I read it. I miss her a lot, and I'm really thankful that she's wanting to support us in our read alouds now. This is an awesome book about a guy who loves reading and writing. I mean, he's obsessed with it. There are a few words I want to talk to you guys about before we read this book. And the first word is the word amiable. The word amiable says, the book was an amiable fellow and urged Morris to follow him. Amiable means having or displaying a friendly or pleasant manner. So it basically means that he was very friendly, very happy. Right? The next word is the word scarcely. The word scarcely is in our book right here. It says that he scarcely emerged for days. And scarcely means rarely or not very often. Okay, I hope that you guys enjoy Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lessmore. Morris Lessmore loved books. He loved words. He loved stories. His life was a book of his own writing, one orderly page after another. He would open it every morning and write of his joys and sorrows, of all that he knew and everything that he hoped for. But every story has its upsets. One day the sky darkened, the winds blew and blew. Till everything Morris knew was scattered, even the words of his book. He didn't know what to do or which way to go, so he began to wander and wander. Then a happy bit of happenstance came his way. Rather than looking down, as had become his habit, Mr. Lessmore looked up. Drifting through the sky above him, Morris saw a lovely lady. She was being pulled along by a festive squadron of flying books. I love the way he describes her with her festive squadron of flying books. Morris wondered if his book could fly, but it couldn't. It would only fall to the ground with a depressing thud. The flying lady knew Morris simply needed a good story, so she sent him her favorite. The book was an amiable fellow and urged Morris to follow him. We've got some personification there. It's giving the book, our author is giving the book some human-like qualities. He even put feet on it. The book led him to an extraordinary building, where many books apparently nested. I wonder what that place would be called. Morris slowly walked inside and discovered the most mysterious and inviting room he had ever seen. It was filled with the fluttering of countless pages, and Morris could hear the faint chatter of 1,000 different stories, as if each book was whispering an invitation to adventure. Looks like a beautiful library. Then his new friend flew up to him and landed on his arm. It held itself open, as if hoping to be read. The room rustled to life. And so Morris's life among the books began. Morris tried to keep the books in some sort of order, but they always mixed themselves up. The tragedies needed cheering up and would visit with the comedies. The encyclopedias, weary of facts, would relax with the comic books and fictions. All in all, it was an agreeable jumble. Morris found great satisfaction in caring for the books, gently fixing those with fragile bindings and unfolding the dog-eared pages of others. It's like a librarian, a book doctor, a librarian. Sometimes Morris would become lost in a book and scarcely emerge for days. I felt that way before. There have been books I just cannot put down. Morris liked to share the books with others. Sometimes it was a favorite that everyone loved, and other times he found a lonely little volume whose tale was seldom told. Everyone's story matters, said Morris, and all the books agreed. At night, after all the stories that needed telling had been told and everyone had settled down to their proper places on the shelves, the great big dictionary would get in the last word. Zzz. It was then that Morris Lessmore would once again write in his own book. He wrote of his joys and sorrows, of all that he knew and everything that he hoped for. The days passed, and so did the months. And then years and years. And Morris Lessmore became stooped and crinkly. But the books never changed. Their stories stayed the same. Now his old friends took care of him the way he had once cared for them, and they read themselves to him each night. Seems that friendship is a theme of this book, too. Yesterday's read aloud had a theme of friendship. Then one day he filled the last page in his book. He looked up and said with a bittersweet sigh, I guess it's time for me to move on. The books were sorry, but they understood. Morris put on his hat and took his cane. As he went to the door, he turned and smiled and waved goodbye. I'll carry you all in here, he said, and pointed to his heart. The books waved their pages, and Morris and Lessmore flew away. And as he flew, he changed back to the way he'd been that long ago day when they'd all first met. The books were quiet for a while. Then they noticed that Mr. Morris Lessmore had left something behind. It's his book, said his oldest friend. Inside was Morris's story, all of his joys and sorrows, all that he knew, and everything that he hoped for. Then the books heard a small, expectant sound. There in the doorway was a little girl. She looked around with wonder, then something fantastic happened. Morris Lessmore's book flew up to her and opened its pages. The girl began to read. And so our story ends as it began, with the opening of a book. I love the ending of that book. I have a nice picture of Mr. Morris Lessmore here. I love that this book talked about how much Mr. Morris Lessmore liked to write. Seems like his book was like his diary. During this time when you guys are at home, I want to challenge you to try and write about what's going on in your life right now. Write about your hopes and your dreams. Write about what you're doing. Write about your thoughts, anything. I know it seems like that can be a diary, and maybe that might be something that only girls do, but that's not true. Lots of guys write and lots of girls write, and it's important to have your thoughts and your feelings written down so that someday you can look back and you can remember those days when you were stuck inside because of, sickness that was going on. Because someday somebody's going to ask you about those things and you're going to want to tell them and you're going to want to remember what was going on in the world. So I want to challenge you guys to try and write, just even if it's just a paragraph every day, about what's going on around you and how you're feeling and what you're thinking. I hope you guys like the fantastic flying books of Mr. Morris Lessmore.